WADR. Promoting dialogue.
It's 6 p.m. in Dakar and Conakry. Good evening and thank you for staying tuned to West Africa Democracy Radio, broadcasting on 94.9 FM in Dakar, Senegal, on social media on YouTube and on Facebook and worldwide at wadr.org. Welcome to Newslink with me, Atiye Winimbila. Here are headline stories. Chadian president sympathizes with families of recent communal clash that claimed over 40 lives. 2 Mauritanian lawmakers receive 4 years in prison sentence each over social media posts. UNESCO urges ethical and independent media amid rising misinformation.
Political economy of the media is also something that is challenging. Media institutions rely on the government.
And the Nigerian government launches a nationwide rally to empower over 10 million women.
When women rise, Nigeria rises.
Please stay tuned for these stories and more.
West Africa Democracy Radio. It's you speaking.
Many thanks once again for joining us. Now let's begin in Chad, where the northeastern region of the country has been hit again by deadly communal violence. According to the government's count, at least 42 people were killed and several others injured. Condemning the violence, Chadian President Mahamat Idris Deby alleged that internal and external actors are responsible for the rising tensions aimed at dividing Chadians. Deby's comment comes against a backdrop of persistent violence in a volatile region already under strain due to its proximity to neighboring Sudan. Abdullahi Hassan has the details.
In an interview with his communication team, Chadian president reflected on his recent visit to the Wadr region from April 28 to May 2, 2026, an area hit by deadly intercommunal violence. The toll is very high, at least 42 people killed according to government figures and up to 60 according to local sources. During his 5-day visit to the region, President Mahamat Idris Deby personally assessed the situation, insisting that leadership means being present in times of crisis. But for the Chadian leader, the roots of the violence go beyond local tensions. He points directly to the war in neighboring Sudan, alleging that both the Sudanese army and the Rapid Support Forces are attempting to export their conflict into Chad by fueling ethnic divisions along the border. He said that frontier, stretching nearly 1,500 kilometers, remains difficult to control, especially with the flow of weapons. He maintains that as long as civilians hold weapons, there will be no peace. However, some local officials accuse authorities of uneven implementation and abuses, including the confiscation of property such as vehicles. In response, the president is tightening pressure on regional and traditional leaders, calling on them to safeguard national unity and social cohesion or face consequences. They must take responsibility or will be taken away from them, he cautioned.
Abdullahi Hassan reporting there. In Mali, the military leadership is undergoing a major reorganization after the killing of Defense Minister General Sadio Kamara in an attack on his residence in Kati on April 25th. Transitional President General Assimi Goïta has moved to take direct control of the Defense Ministry, with Army Chief General Oumar Diarra serving as Deputy Defense Minister. These changes come at a time of persistent insecurity across the country, with many in Bamako reacting cautiously to the changes.
The head of Mali's transition, General Assimi Goïta, now also holds the position of Minister of Defense. The move, according to some residents in the capital Bamako, is justified by the recent wave of attacks.
I think the decision for the transitional president to also take on the role of Minister of Defense is quite a wise one. Given the current situation in the country, it appears to be a carefully considered move, and it also shows a reduced level of trust in others.
Others, however, point to the appointment of the Army Chief of Staff, General Oumar Diarra, as Deputy Minister of Defense, saying it simply strengthens an already existing military command structure.
We're in a critical phase, so appointing someone in this context who is not familiar with ongoing operations or fully immersed in the realities on the ground could still cause harm. However, it also helps ensure day-to-day management of the ministry and guarantees continuity of command.
But some citizens remain unconvinced, arguing that these changes are unlikely to bring any real shift in military strategy on the ground.
I don't think these changes will systematically improve the security situation. They were aligned in the same line of thinking. These are people who share almost the same values.
Authorities say the reorganization should tighten security coordination and boost the fight against terrorist groups as military operations continue across the country.
A report by WADR's Alucham in Bamako and voiced by Sankule Janko. Let's now head to Mauritania, where 2 opposition lawmakers have been sentenced to 4 years in prison each in a ruling that is drawing attention to the country. As Augustine Colley reports, the members of parliament were convicted over social media posts deemed offensive to national symbols and social cohesion.
A court in Nouakchott has sentenced 2 opposition lawmakers, Gamou Acho and Mariam Sheikh Jeng, to 4 years in prison each after a closely followed trial that has sparked debate across Mauritania. The 2 members of parliament were convicted over social media posts judged by the court to be harmful to national symbols and social cohesion. They also face accusations of defamation, threats, and incitement to violence. The ruling was delivered by the criminal chamber of the Nouakchott West Court at a time of growing political tension and heightened scrutiny of online speech and dissent in the country. Furthermore, the case is drawing particular attention because the convictions were handed down without any prior move to lift the lawmakers' parliamentary immunity, raising questions among observers about legal procedure and the separation of powers. Alongside the prison sentences, the court ordered the removal of the disputed online content and imposed additional digital restrictions. But beyond the political dynamics, citizens and opposition political groups have expressed worry over the emerging trend of suppression of freedom of expression and political debate in Mauritania.
Augustine Colley with that report.
More stories coming up on West Africa Democracy Radio. Newslink continues.
Now to the Gambia, where the Attorney General and Ministry of Defense says it is reviewing the coroner's inquest report into the death of Omar Badji. The report released last week indicated that there was no foul play in the death of Badji, a young protester who died while in police custody in 2025. However, the family is disputing these findings and has given the Attorney General a 7-day ultimatum to determine the true cause of death. WADR Sang Donald Mendy completes the story.
Omar Badji died after an encounter with police officers in Mandinari in September 2025. His case has since triggered public outrage and demands for accountability. In a statement issued on the 5th of May, authorities say the Attorney General's Chambers has requested the Inspector General of Police to provide the full case file to support what it calls a thorough assessment. The government acknowledges growing public concern and says the coroner's recommendations, including possible prosecutions of officers implicated, will be carefully examined. It adds that legal action will be taken where evidence justifies it. Officials are also urging calm, insisting that due process must be allowed to take its course. With rising frustration in Mandinari, youth leaders have given the government a 7-day ultimatum demanding accountability following the inquest. Among their demands include a formal apology from the Gambia police force over what they describe as an earlier misleading account of the incident and the immediate prosecution of officers named in the report. They argue that implementing the coroner's recommendations is essential to maintaining public trust. Meanwhile, civil society organizations are also calling for swift justice and full accountability in the death of Omar Badji and urge for independent and transparent process. The case is now shaping up as a key test of the government's commitment to justice as legal processes unfold under intense public scrutiny. For Newslink on West Africa Democracy Radio, I'm Sangdana Mendy, reporting from Banjul.
Now, in a world of increasingly shaped by conflict, misinformation, and deepening social divisions, the role of journalism has never been this critical. According to UNESCO's World Trends Report 2022 to 2025, titled Journalism Shaping a World at Peace, freedom of expression is eroding, and sadly by 10%. The report, released in commemoration of World Press Freedom Day, underscores how credible, ethical, and independent media can serve as a stabilizing force and make sense of complex realities. Let's join Imo Edet, who attended the West Africa Regions Forum organized by UNESCO, to highlight findings of the report.
The UNESCO report covering the period from 2022 to 2026 highlights a growing number of violations of press freedom by states. The organization expresses concern over the introduction of legal frameworks which are increasingly being used as a strategy to legitimize restrictions on press freedom. Michelle Kenmo, the organization's West Africa advisor for communication and information at UNESCO, explains more.
The decline in freedom of expression is a major concern in our region. The number of journalists that are arrested, and even if they are not put in prison, but the simple fact that many journalists in many countries in the region, they don't know if the next morning they will not wake up having a police officer or security officer at its door to harass the journalists, generally just for publishing truth. We have also seen the fact that some journalists have even been extradited from a country to another one, which is a source of concern.
In a tense geopolitical context where governments often attempt to control information, the decriminalization of press offenses remains a major challenge for many leaders. For his part, Julius Kanuba, president of the Liberia Press Union, frowned at the poor remuneration of journalists, which he says leads to a degradation of the profession, stressing that as of 2026, many journalists continue to face low pay, lack of contract, and heavy workloads, leading to burnout and talent attrition from the industry.
The political economy of the media is also something that is challenging. Media institutions rely on the government in terms of advertisement. So, yes, media owners have been complaining that they are now receiving advertising revenues and that the government is indebted to them. And this is having a chilling effect on the everyday journalists, people who are reporting. Journalists are significantly underpaid in Liberia. And as we emphasized during the World Press Freedom Day yesterday, there can be no press freedom when journalists are in poverty.
According to Reporters Without Borders, the state of press freedom worldwide is now considered worrying for the first time.
Imo Edet with those details, and we remain on World Press Freedom Day celebrations. Liberian journalists on Monday marked the day with renewed calls for stronger press independence. The celebration, organized by the Press Union of Liberia, was held in Kakata, Marigibi County under the theme Advancing Press Freedom for Human Rights Development. It brought together journalists, civil society actors, and government officials to assess the state of media freedom in the country. WADR's Monrovia correspondent Abraham Parker reports.
World Press Freedom Day, observed every May 3, celebrates the role of a free and independent media in promoting democracy, transparency, and accountability. Speaking in Liberia, the resident representative of the United Nations Development Program, Aliyu Dia, warned that democracy cannot thrive without a free press.
More importantly, press freedom is also about responsibility. It is what allows citizens to see how they are governed, to understand decisions that affect their lives, and to hold power accountable. Without press freedom, democracy becomes fragile.
In his keynote address, President of the Press Union of Liberia, Julius Kanuba, urged the government of President Joseph Boakai to uphold constitutional protections for press freedom.
In our recent position statement on the gradual erosion of democratic norms in Liberia, particularly freedom of speech and expression, under the administration of President Joseph Boakai, we clearly articulated as a union that there can be no rescue without freedom.
Meanwhile, the latest report by Reporters Without Borders says press freedom remains under pressure globally, with economic challenges increasingly threatening media independence. In Liberia, journalists also used the occasion to call for a better welfare, improved salaries, insurance coverage, and stronger institutional support for media workers. For Newslink on WADR, Abraham Parker, Monrovia.
You're listening to Newslink on West Africa Democracy Radio, broadcasting on 94.9 FM in Dakar, Senegal, online at wadr.org, as well as live on YouTube and Facebook. Here's a reminder of our top stories this evening. Chadian president sympathizes with families of recent communal clash that claimed over 40 lives. 2 Mauritanian lawmakers receive 4 years in prison sentence each over social media posts. And UNESCO urges ethical and independent media amidst rising misinformation. Still ahead in the news, we are in Nigeria, where the government has launched a nationwide rally to empower 10 million women. We also have guest interview and sports news coming up. Do stay.
Fresh and breaking news all the time. Hear it first as the news breaks, only on West Africa Democracy Radio. Newslink continues.
The federal government of Nigeria has held its National Women's Mega Empowerment Rally in Abuja, bringing together women from across the country to promote inclusion, economic growth, and national development. The event focused on expanding opportunities for women with stakeholders, highlighting the critical role in shaping Nigeria's future. WADR's Abuja correspondent Yachenu Sasetu reports.
The rally, organized by the Federal Ministry of Women Affairs, served as a platform to showcase ongoing efforts aimed at empowering women at the grassroots and across key sectors of the economy. Minister of Women Affairs, Iman Suleiman Ibrahim, commended the present administration for creating more opportunities for women.
Never in the history of Nigeria have we seen this level of attention, prioritization, and show of political will for the Nigerian woman. What a time to be a Nigerian woman.
In her remarks, Nigeria's First Lady Oluremi Tinubu stressed the importance of investing in women, describing empowerment as a key pathway to sustainable growth and national progress.
From those who fought for our democracy to the millions who labor daily to support their families and communities, their contributions to nation building are profound. When women rise, Nigeria rises. I am going to receive your charter.
At the event, a Women's Empowerment Charter was presented to the First Lady, outlining key demands and policy priorities aimed at strengthening women's participation in governance and economic activities. The Minister of Women Affairs explained that the charter reflects the collective voice of Nigerian women.
This charter represents the collective voices, the aspiration and strategic expectations of Nigerian women. It is not merely a document, it's a social contract, a policy, a compass, a bold declaration of our place in the future of this nation. Leadership is not beyond us, and our voice...
Themed the power of 10 million, one voice, one movement, one choice. The rally is an initiative being positioned as a structured intervention rather than a symbolic gathering. It is also designed to consolidate women's participation in governance and economic systems. For WADR, Yechene Sasetu in Abuja.
Well, let's go to Ghana. The country is set to take center stage in the global reparations debate as it prepares to host a major international conference on restorative justice. The high-level gathering slated for June 17 to 19, 2026 follows the adoption of a landmark United Nations resolution in March this year. The resolution recognizes the transatlantic slave trade as the gravest crime against humanity. Francis Boniface completes the story.
Led by President John Dramani Mahama, the African Union's champion for reparations, the conference aims to turn the UN's historic resolution, adopted in March, into concrete global action. According to Ghana's Foreign Affairs Ministry, heads of state, ministers, legal scholars, academics, activists, and international organizations are expected in Accra for the 3-day summit. During the gathering, they will discuss practical pathways toward justice, reparations, and stronger international cooperation. Delegates are also expected to adopt an outcome document outlining key recommendations and future action plans. A major highlight of the event will be a Juneteenth commemoration ceremony at Christiansborg Palace, a powerful symbol of the transatlantic slave trade. Organized with members of the African diaspora in the United States, the ceremony will focus on remembrance, recognition, and the continuing call for reparatory justice. Organizers say the conference is expected to reinforce growing international momentum for reparations and deepen global conversations on historical accountability and justice.
Francis Boniface reporting.
Politics, analysis on major news, social matters, and all. This is A Guest.
And it's all about Mali because the extremist group JNIM is calling on the population to support efforts to end military rule in Bamako, claiming it is the only path towards lasting peace. Now, Malian authorities, however, are urging national unity and warning citizens against what they describe as misleading propaganda. As insecurity continues across the country, calls for dialogue with armed groups are growing louder, with some observers questioning whether religious leaders could help mediate talks between the authorities and the militants. Brahima Sidibe is a Malian political analyst and he weighs on this subject.
Oui, c'est vrai qu'on a constaté un certain changement de ton de la part du JNIM.
Yes, it is true that we've noticed a change in tone from JNIM, with the group now talking about peace and reconciliation. But I think this is also a way of playing with words, while essentially repeating the same message. When we look at the abuses committed across the country and the many victims linked to JNIM over the years, it is difficult to see the statements as being matched by actions. Most Malians remain attached to the secular nature of the state, and after the tragic event of April 25, including the killing of General Sadio Camara, there has also been a strong sense of national unity and emotion among the population. Given the context, I do not think JNIM's opportunistic rhetoric will gain much support within Malian public opinion.
Malian authorities are calling for national unity in light of the tense security situation, but to achieve that, should there not also be efforts to ease the socio-political climate, especially as many military officers and critical voices remain detained, some for several years?
The current situation could justify opening up public space in order to strengthen national unity around the state and the nation. But I think it is important to distinguish between different cases, because not all those detained are accused of the same things. Some individuals imprisoned for matters unrelated to the recent April 25 attacks could potentially benefit from a political opening. I'm thinking in particular of former Prime Ministers Shogel Maïga and Moussa Mara, as well as other civil society figures. However, since investigations linked to the April 25 attacks are still ongoing, the authorities may prefer to wait until the situation becomes clearer before moving toward a broader political opening. For now, the priority appears to be advancing those investigations, but in the near or medium term, opening up public space could indeed become necessary.
Il serait bien effectivement d'aller vers cette ouverture de l'espace public.
As calls for dialogue to restore peace after more than a decade of insecurity in Mali continue to grow, should religious leaders be involved in facilitating talks between the authorities and armed groups?
Religious leaders have always carried significant influence in Mali, and they could certainly play an important role. Institutions such as the High Islamic Council of Mali, the Catholic Church, the Protestant churches, all have respected leaders whose voices matter. But when it comes to directly opening dialogue with terrorist groups, the decision ultimately belongs to the state. At this stage, it does not appear that the transitional authorities have chosen that path.
On the other hand, how could religious leaders serve as a bridge between armed groups and the authorities, given the fact that they have played such roles before, especially Imam Mahmoud Dicko, the former president of the High Islamic Council of Mali?
C'est vrai que parmi les leaders religieux au Mali.
Yes, among Mali's religious leaders, Imam Dicko is probably the one seen as closest to some of these groups. But today, because of his strained relationship with the authorities, that channel appears more complicated. Beyond Imam Dicko, other religious figures are closer to the government. Still, the Malian state has not yet chosen the path of dialogue with terrorist groups. The real question is how long that position can continue.
Je pense que toute la question est là.
Brian Masidibe is a Malian political analyst. He was weighing in on that very important subject. Let's bring you some sports news all about AFCON 2027 because the draw for the African Cup of Nations qualifier set for May 19th is building anticipation ahead of the tournament to be co-hosted by Kenya, Tanzania and Uganda. A total of 43 teams will compete, divided into 12 groups of 4, with top performers qualifying for the final tournament. Teams have been seeded into 4 posts based on rankings, with heavyweights like Senegal, Morocco, Nigeria and Egypt leading pot 1. Other pots include competitive mid-level teams and lower-ranked sides, setting the stage for potentially balanced groups and surprise outcomes in the qualification race. The format also increases the chances of more competitive fixtures across the continent, allowing emerging teams to challenge traditional powerhouses. Let's bring you some other sports news. The Confederation of Africa Football CAF Referees Committee has appointed controversial Congolese referee Jean-Jacques Ndala to officiate the first leg of the 2026 CAF Champions League final. Ndala is expected to take charge of the first encounter between Morocco FAS Rabat and South Africa's Mamelodi Sundowns, which is scheduled for May 17 in Pretoria, South Africa. Ndala came under heavy criticism following his handling of the 2025 African Cup of Nations final, and the experienced referee has remained one of CAF's highly rated referees despite the unfortunate scenes in the AFCON final as well as recent games on the continent. CAF also confirmed Somali referee Omar Artan will take the charge of the second leg of the final, which will take place on May 24 in Rabat, Morocco. And we have come to the end of this edition of Newslink on West Africa Democracy Radio, broadcasting from Dakar, Senegal. Thanks so much for listening. Thanks to Ismaila Kamara and Maudo Juf for the technical assistance. Do continue to interact with us via all our social media platforms, X, Instagram, Facebook at WADR English. I am Atiyewe Nimbila. Have a good evening.
We thank you for listening to Newslink in Nigeria on Love FM Abuja and Darling FM Owerri. In the Gambia on Hot FM Banjul, Hilltop FM and Veritas Radio in Serekunda. Thank you for listening on Alternative Youth Radio Lofa County, Liberia, Radio Kegaman in Nimba County and DCN Radio Riverses County. A big thank you to Radio Baft FM in Sierra Leone for listening, and in Ghana we thank Radio Pad in Damango and Royals FM in Wenchi. Thank you all for listening to Newslink.